Do your brakes sound like a 12-year-old singing karaoke? Chances are your brake pads need changing. We can help. This is how to replace your brake pads in 5 easy steps. Here's what you'll need: brake pads, fresh brake fluid, brake cleaner, squeal stop, brake lubricant, a brake spreader, line clamps, cable ties, and a workshop manual for your vehicle. If you don't already have a comprehensive toolkit, trolley jack and axle stands, and a torque wrench, now is the time to purchase them. To make sure you've got the right brake pads for your vehicle, pop your rego into the Supercheap Auto My Garage feature or ask in store. Now, back to your car for step 1, accessing and inspecting the brakes. This means taking some wheels off. Protect your eyes with some glasses and your hands with some gloves. Pop your vehicle in park or in gear with the handbrake on and chock whichever wheels you won't be removing. Now, loosen the wheel nuts on both sides of your vehicle. It's much easier to do this while they're on the ground. Then grab your trolley jack, raise the vehicle and make sure your axle stands are in place for safety. Spin the wheel nuts the rest of the way off, remove the wheels, and it's time for a quick inspection to make sure it's nothing super serious. You're looking for any deep scoring or burn marks on the brake rotor or an excessive lip around the edge. You're also looking for anything obviously broken or loose around the rotor and caliper. If there are any doubts, don't hesitate to call in a mechanic. If it's all good, then changing your brake pads is the right move and you're ready for step 2, removing the old brake pads. This is the caliper. This is the caliper mount. Only the caliper needs to be removed, so look closely for the bolts holding the caliper to the mount and remove them. The caliper will now be connected to your vehicle by only the brake hose. Do not remove the brake hose. Simply tie the caliper out of the way with a cable tie. Your old brake pads now easily pop out of their mounts. Pay attention to their orientation and compare them to your new pads. There may be parts not present on the new pads, which need to be switched over. Now, leave all the brake pads to the side for a bit while you move on to step 3, preparing for new brake pads. The first thing here is to make some space because as your old pads wore down, this piston moved in. You need to open the space up again for your new pads. To do this, you'll grab the brake spreader, the line clamps, a small piece of hose and a spanner. Clamp the brake line as close to the caliper as possible, slip the hose over the bleed nipple and use that spanner to loosen the bleed nipple. Be ready with an old jar or tin to catch the fluid. Slip the brake spreader into the caliper and start winding the thread. The piston will begin to push back into the caliper and the dirty fluid will be expelled through the bleed nipple. Then nip that bleed nipple back up, remove the hose and remove your line clamp. Ask your local council where to safely dispose of the old brake fluid. Now for a squirt of brake cleaner to clean up brake dust and any fluid that may have spilled. Soak everything liberally. It won't damage anything, although it's not good for your skin, so keep those gloves on. Finally, apply some brake lubricant to your caliper and mount. Spread a thin layer on the slide pins. A small paintbrush is quite helpful. Be very careful not to apply lubricant on or too close to the brake rotor or where it will contaminate the friction surface of your brake pad. Excellent, that's the worst of the job done. Let's move on to step 4, fitting the new pads. A smear of stop squeal on the back of the new brake pads will help keep things quiet. Slot the pads into the caliper the same way the old ones came out, being careful not to smudge lubricant or stop squeal onto the braking surfaces. Now replace the caliper into its mount. It may require a little jiggling into place because your new brake pads are thicker than your old worn ones. Replace the bolts you took out earlier and fasten them finger tight. Then check the recommended torque for these in your workshop manual and set your torque wrench for this. It's super important to torque these correctly. One last wipe over the rotor with a rag and some brake cleaner and the wheel can go back on. When that's done, it's time for step 5, finishing up. Tighten the wheel nuts just enough to hold the wheels on, then remove the axle stands and lower the vehicle. Now you'll be able to torque them to specification in your workshop manual. Then you can head over to the other side and repeat the process, which should be quicker because you've done it before. And lastly, because you removed a little brake fluid when compressing the brake pistons, you'll need to pop the bonnet and check the brake fluid level. Then hop in the driver's seat and press the brake pedal. It will probably go to the floor. This is normal. Just pump it a few times until it's firm. Then one more check and top up the brake fluid because pumping that brake pedal has moved the fluid down to the pistons. If your brakes remain feeling spongy after this, you may need to perform a full bleed of your brake system. And with that, you're pretty much done. But before you zip down to the shops for a loaf of bread, test your brakes a few times in the driveway. It's much safer than discovering any mistakes on the open road. If you've done everything right, your brakes should be singing a much nicer tune, which means they won't be making any sound at all. Now, what's next? Explore what else you can do with Supercheap Auto's super DIYs.